Welcome to Why Knowledge Matters. Welcome, Richard. So great to have you on our show. Hope you're doing fine.
Well, the Montreal Canadiens won an important hockey game yesterday, and my daughter and I went downtown, and I've never seen anything like it. What a celebration. So you got me at a very good time. I'm feeling ebullient.
That is wonderful to hear that. I'm also a big hockey fan and I'm so happy for the Montreal Canadiens. And I also jumped on the bandwagon. I just bought about six jersey, a couple of months ago, and it really came out nicely. So I love it. Really, it will
Yeah.
be amazing for the city.
Yeah, I have a
Um,
recommendation for you. You should get a Cole Caulfield jersey because they're going to be very valuable one day. He's a young superstar.
Richard, how did you get into goal setting?
Okay. Well, I've been a motivation researcher for 40 years. And one of the things I found was after the first 20 years, when I would meet someone, I would explain I'm a motivation researcher. And invariably, what people would say is, I could use some of that. I need some of that. And what they need is they need more focus, drive, energy. And many of us feel like our personal lives would be better if we had more motivation. We may feel like, boy, we have the talent or we have the interest, but what we're lacking is motivation. Sometimes when I meet someone, what they'll say is, my son needs some of that. I get that very often too. Uh, and what I typically will do, like if I met you on a train or a plane while you're going back to Switzerland and we started talking, is I would say that there is something we do when we need motivation. And we've been doing it since we're 4 or 5 years old. And that is we set a personal goal. A goal is a mental representation of something we want to happen for ourselves. And there's a lot of research which suggests that as soon as we set a goal, there's an action plan that jumps into place. So that by setting a goal, we focus attention, we give effort, and we prepare ourselves to persist. So uh, when we're like 6 years old and we want to learn how to ride a bicycle, we know we have to focus attention. We know we're going to have to give it effort, and we know we're going to fall down a few times. But so we learned this early in our lives, and we continue to use that. So let's say you're back in Switzerland, you're going to be there for the summer. Uh, you might be thinking about this show or something you want to do, and you feel you need more motivation. So what you might do is say, okay, I'm going to wake up every morning, 8 o'clock. I'm going to do 2 hours editing my show. I'm going to work on this, work on that. And that's a personal goal. Now, the field of goal setting, there's kind of a consensus on what people are advised. And it's captured in an acronym called SMART goals. And what that refers to is that we should set specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-framed goals. And the idea is if we're very careful about following that framework, we'll be more successful. We'll self-regulate better in relation to our goals. Uh, Very common is people have ambiguous goals, non-specific. I want to do better. I want to work harder. It's not specific enough. So uh, uh, most organizational psychologists, sports psychologists, they would tell you about setting SMART goals. And if I met you on a train, I'd probably just tell you about that. But if you were more interested and if you wanted a deeper analysis, I would tell you that the SMART goals aren't really that smart and they won't get you that far. So that unfortunately, my big insight into personal goal setting is that we fail almost all the time and that we don't even realize how frequently we fail. Now, if I'm telling this to you and your listeners or watchers, you probably say, no, that can't be true. And I would say, Yannick, did you make a New Year's resolution this year? Did you make a resolution last year? We're now like halfway through the year. How is that resolution working out for you? Like, did you say you were going to exercise more? Did you say you were going to read more good books? Let's take a look at what's happened. Because there's been a number of studies where they do something very simple. They follow up people every week, every month about their New Year's resolutions. What you'll find is that after 1 week, 25% of people say they failed. After 1 month, it's about 50%. At the halfway mark, it's about 70% failed. Uh, there's pretty good evidence that at a year follow-up at best, maybe 5%. And New Year's resolutions are really strongly committed goals. New Year's resolutions are important health behaviors quite often. The most popular resolutions are to quit smoking or to eat better or to exercise more. And if all of us did those three things, you know, on average, we'd live 10 years longer. So they're really important. And a resolution isn't just a goal. A resolution is I'm resolving, I'm committing, this is really serious. But even with those, we're terrible. Now, why are we terrible? I think there's a fundamental reason, and other motivational psychologists have pointed to this, most specifically Roy Baumeister. And uh, in order to follow through on a goal, you need some self-control resources. You need the capacity to alter the way you typically behave. So instead of having a snack every day at 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 6 o'clock, you got to replace that snack with something else. But it's really hard to find the self-control because there's evidence now that each of us has a limited amount. You may have more than I do, and I have more than other people, but each of us has our own personal limit of self-control. And there is evidence suggesting that most of us in our everyday lives exhaust our limit every day, every week. So our lives are so busy, so frantic, so goal focused. I've communicated with you for the last 2 weeks and you're flying this way, that way, you're moving into a new apartment, you're moving out of an apartment, you're going from one continent to the next continent. That takes a lot of self-control. So and what I would say is someone who might be watching this might be a mother with 2 kids during the pandemic. So they're trying to do their work at home. They're trying to supervise their kids' work. It's just too much. So we're maxed out and we don't have any self-control resources. And every time we have a new goal, the problem we'll face is that we won't have the self-control capacity, the willpower, the focus and effort to stay with it. So the premise of everything I've done is that when you're setting your goal, you have to realize you don't have the self-control or you're not likely to have enough of it. So early on, you have to understand that you're most likely going to fail. And that what you have to do is figure out some way to get around the self-control barrier we each face. And there are 3 things that I recommend. 2 of them, they're my own research. One of them is the research of a German motivational psychologist named Peter Gollwitzer. I'll tell you about his idea first. So he argues that one mistake we make is we think, okay, we've set the goal. Now all the good things are going to happen. And he would say, no, setting the goal is just an intention. It's a wish. It's a desire. It's only the first step. But once you have a goal, you need a plan to go with it. So a goal that I always had was to drink more water every day because, I was getting headaches and I think I was dehydrated. So I actually gave a talk once to a group and I said, I failed at this 5 times. At the end of the talk, a lady came up and she gave me a water bottle like this. She hadn't drunk from it. It was a new water bottle. And she said, this is going to solve your problem. And I said, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? It's a water bottle. And she said, no, you need a plan. And then she explained how someone had told her that if you have a water bottle and you carry it with you in your backpack and you put it at your workstation, what it does is it acts as an automatic reminder. And what you do then is you see whether it's full or empty. And every time you go to the bathroom or to the mail room, you take it with you and you fill it up, bring it back. And as soon as she told me that, I never had a problem again. And what this is an implementation plan. It's a plan that specifies where, when, and how I'm going to accomplish this goal. So I'm going to be drinking when I'm at my workstation. How am I going to do it? I'm going to have a water bottle that I'll take with me. Uh, and the advantage of an implementation plan is it makes it automatic. It becomes a habit right away. And that way you don't have to have the self-control of like remembering, pushing yourself. It's just an automatic phenomenon. So here's a simple example. Many of us want to exercise more. So, okay, what's your plan? A lot of people say, well, I'm going to try to exercise 2 or 3 days a week. That's not good enough. What specific days, what time, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? So I might say, okay, I'm going to go to the YMCA, 8 o'clock in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday during the summer. That's a nice implementation plan because it's first thing in the morning and it's before you will be overtaken by all the things that come up in a regular day. But you probably even want to be more specific. I'm going to do this class. I'm going to do that class. And that's a good implementation plan. But the implementation plans actually, the way Peter Gollwitzer does this is he has people spend 3 to 5 minutes to write it out. And then he challenges them. After they've written their plan, he says, okay, what's the obstacle? What's likely to go wrong? And then what are you going to do? So if you had the plan of exercising Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 o'clock, the obstacle is, well, what if you have to do an interview with Koestner in Canada on Wednesday morning? So you need a plan for, okay, if I can't do the 8 o'clock, I'm going to do 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm going to go to the spin class over here. And what Gollwitz has been able to show is you double your success rate if you have a goal and then you add an implementation plan. And the reason you double it is because you're taking, you're making it automatic and you're taking the problem of self-control out of the picture. So the first thing, and many people in this area believe it's just amazing how useful and helpful implementation plans are. So you should know about that. That's not my idea, but I recommend that highly. Now I'll tell you about my idea, 2 of them, and they're very closely related to self-determination theory, which is the theory I work with. Self-determination theory looks at why you're doing the things you do. And for example, you have a personal goal. So you would think, okay, a personal goal is because the person really cares about it and they really want to do it. We have ways of examining why you're doing something. We ask your reasons. And what we find is a lot of the goals we set, in some way, they're not really personal and we don't really want to do them. We feel like we have to do them, or others expect us to do them, or everyone else is doing them, so we should do them too. So we distinguish between those kinds of goals, those have to goals, which we refer to as controlled, and then other types of goals that are truly autonomous, where you feel volitional. And those goals are defined by doing it because you're interested or because it's personally meaningful, it connects with your values. The shocking thing that we found early in our research is that most of the personal goals we set are not really personal. They're more controlled than they are autonomous. If you look at these goals, you might think, boy, it seems like someone else set this for you. And that's a real problem. And the problem comes from the fact that if you set controlled goals that you feel pressured to set, you're not going to embrace those goals wholeheartedly. And you're not going to overcome the self control barrier that we all face. On the other hand, if you, for example, if you start exercising and if you think about it and you say, well, when I was a kid, I used to like basketball or I like ping pong. And if you did something you were interested in, or if you did something that was personally meaningful, there's no inertia barrier to overcome. You're just drawn to it. And when you start engaging in it, we've shown that when people choose an autonomous goal, uh, they're less easily distracted by other things. They manage obstacles more easily. And the effort pursue the goal seems to come naturally, almost effortlessly. So the major thing that myself, Ken Sheldon, Rich Ryan, and many others, we recommend to be careful about what goals you're selecting. And if it's a personal goal, you should make sure that it's something that's interesting and personally valuable. So even though most personal goals are self-initiated and self-directed, the problem is that they're not really self-endorsed. So it's not like, boy, we want to do this. We feel lucky to get to do this and we embrace it wholeheartedly. Instead, it feels like we have to do this. We got to do this. And we're half-hearted and conflicted. And that's a tough way to go through our motivational lives. So we really want to be more reflective and thoughtful about the goals we choose. So if you have some goals for the summer, Yannick, I take a look at it and ask yourself, okay, am I doing this because it's interesting? Am I doing it because it's meaningful? Or is this something that I should do? Or is this something that others want me to do? And you want the balance to be more on that autonomous side. Okay. So I've told you two things now. One is to use implementation plans, which is kind of a cognitive trick to make pursuing the goal more automatic. And then I'm telling you to be very careful about the goals you select. It's one of the most wonderful things about being a human. We could actually make choices, make selections, take advantage of it, and really reflect on what goals and choices connect with who you are, what you care about. Now, the last bit of advice, I use the term personal goals, but what I've learned, and I didn't know this at the beginning, is that every personal goal is also interpersonal. And that people in our lives, the people who care about you, they care about your personal goals. So you have some friends in Switzerland. I'm sure within a week of being back there, you will figure out what new goals they're pursuing. And it's just something we do. And it's actually not just asking to figure it out. All of us share our goals and benefit from support of others. So we always think of social support in terms of, okay, something bad happens, I'm in a crisis, who's going to help me? It turns out we actually need support for our growth activities. And pursuing personal goals is kind of a paradigmatic growth activity. So, uh, what I've focused on is how other people, support from family and friends and even acquaintances, how that can make a difference. And the reason it makes a difference is because there's this self-control barrier. And if we have other people helping us, what we're doing is we're outsourcing some of the motivational burden of pursuing these goals so that the other people ask us about it, they listen to us, they support us. Now, so there's really good evidence that social support makes a big difference. But what I've done is I've distinguished between two kinds of support. So what's most common, most typical is that we want to be cheerleaders for our friends and family. So if your brother, if he's trying to eat healthier, if he's trying to become a vegan because his cholesterol is like off the roof, what you're likely to say, what I'm likely to say, that's so great. It's finally doing this. This is going to be so good for you. I'm with you on this. Have you thought about eating this? Have you thought about eating that? And then we jump in, and I call this directive support, where we feel like we're a teammate or a coach who has to show that we care, and we're going to push them across all of the barriers and help them. Now, that's our most common way, directive support. There's another way of supporting, uh, and it's related to something that's been called invisible support. And I call it autonomy support, where what you do is you just show interest, you empathize, you take the other person's perspective, and it's a quiet, reflective, interested kind of support. In the social support literature, they find the most helpful support is what they call invisible support, where the person who you're supporting doesn't even know you're supporting them. And that's because you're not giving suggestions, you're not giving reminders, you're just showing interest, asking their perspective, and you know, letting them be the director of their own personal goals instead of you jumping in. So I've done about 25 studies now where we ask people to indicate a friend and a family member who's supporting them, and then we ask, are they doing it in an autonomy supportive way or a directive way? What we find is the directive way, most often it just has no effect. It doesn't hurt or damage the goal pursuit. But the autonomy support has a really positive effect, very robust, very reliable. People make more goal progress when they have friends and family who are supporting them in this invisible, empathic way. Not only do they make more goal progress, the relationship gets better. It's fun. It's wonderful to have autonomy supportive goal supporters instead of having people who are directing and managing what you're doing. The final thing is well-being improves. And well-being usually improves when we're making progress at our goals. But when you have autonomous goal support, well-being improves even more than just the progress. It's almost like it's a shared progress. It's almost like me with the Montreal Canadiens. It's like I feel like I shared this victory and I'm benefiting from it somehow. So the three things that I recommend are using an implementation plan. Well, let me do them in order. So the first thing you have to figure out is what do you want to pursue? And you shouldn't have 5 New Year's resolutions. You should only have two. And you maybe should ask yourself, is this the right time? January in Montreal is the worst possible time to set a New Year's resolution because life is difficult, life is tough. We have more self control challenges. I recommend to all Canadians that they go ahead and set a New Year's goal, but then to reset it on Canada Day, July 1st. That's usually like summer holidays, the days are brighter, life is easier. I've started doing that and I have much more success when I reset the goal in July. Because you need at least, 4 to 6 weeks of pursuing the goal successfully so it can become a habit. And that's really hard to do in January because it's a tough time of year in Montreal. And as an academic, I'm starting a new semester. So think about when you're going to set the goal. Then you want to think about probably only setting one or two goals. And then you want to make sure that goal is something that appeals to your interests and your values, and that there's not a lot of pressure on hanging on it. There's no one who's pushing you to do it. And sometimes this pushing can come from inside. Like I always set a goal to go to church every week because I'm a Catholic, and I interjected this notion that if you don't go to church on Sunday, that's a mortal sin that's the equivalent of killing someone. It's a crazy, primitive notion, but as a Catholic, that's something that I somehow got as a kid. So for me, if I want to go to start going to church, I don't want that to be my main reason. I want it to be because I want to find a community. I'm getting older. I want to deal with some important issues about meaning of life and death. So I have to find an intrinsic reason. So you figure out when's a good time to set a goal, when the self control demands are not like the highest they've ever been. Then you select one or two goals that are more autonomous. That means they're interesting to you and meaningful. After you've set that goal, you make the implementation plan. It only takes 3 to 5 minutes. Where, when, and how are you going to do it? Try to make it personally friendly. So if you're a morning person, set it for a morning. If your goal is to write more, and if your best writing time is from like 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning, make the plan so you write at that time. That's my best time for writing. Okay, so you have you pick the right time of the year. You reflected and you chose an autonomous goal. You have a lovely implementation plan. The final thing to do is be thoughtful about who supports you with these goals. If you have a directive supporter, don't talk to them too much. Look for the people who are the invisible supporters, the ones who share your interests, who are happy to talk to you about it, but who let you manage the whole process and who don't try to like push you because the pushing backfires almost always. And all three of these things, choosing the autonomous goal, having an implementation plan, having support, autonomy support of others, all three of those things help you overcome the human barrier of having a limited amount of self-control. And so that's what I would recommend.
Richard, what made you interested in the psychology of motivation and goal setting on a personal note?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Uh, uh, Most of my work is focused on the concept of autonomy. And I think, uh, from grade school, high school, I've always been very alert to when other people are trying to control me. And I'm alert not only to like clear attempts to control with rewards and punishment, but I've always been very alert to sneaky ways in which people can try to control you and guide you. Like you tell a student, oh boy, you're really good at this. You should go in this field. Oh, here's some books to read. Why don't you? And so I think there's something about me where I've always been fascinated by control and autonomy. And uh, I've always felt that, well, most people get it wrong. So if you think about how we try to motivate children, how parents and teachers do it, there's three things we do. We offer rewards. Okay, if you play your piano today, Yannick, I'm going to give you 5 Swiss francs. uh, or if you get an A in your graduate courses, I'm going to get you a new car. So those are the things. So there's the offer of rewards for activities that should be intrinsically motivating, or at least people should identify with them and care. So adults offer rewards. The next thing they do is they offer praise, but praise is often controlling. It's like, Yannick, you're so good at this. You should really do this full time. Why don't you do this, Yannick? Why don't you do that? Uh, and then the final thing is we introduce competition. We figure, boy, nothing's going to toughen someone up and hone their skills as much as competing with other people who like to do the same thing they do. And there's a lot of evidence that what happens when you introduce rewards, praise, and competition, you change the focus of young people from just being excited about learning and extending their skills and exploring a new activity to something that's all about pleasing adults, beating other kids, moving forward in this crazy competition. So uh, I've always been very suspicious of the way adults motivate children and youth. I mean, I make some of the same mistakes. I was really surprised when my daughter was born and she was 2 or 3. She was very when she was getting baptized. She got baptized late at the age of 2, and I had to use M&Ms while we were waiting to keep her quiet and in her seat. Uh, and that's not something a self-determination theory researcher would think that he's using. And even when my daughter was like 5 and 6, she would sometimes have tantrums, and then I would lose my temper. But there's this marvelous, marvelous book called How to Talk to Children So That Children Will Listen, and How to Listen to Children So That Children Will Talk. It's based on the work of Haim Ginott, who I think is the most insightful child psychologist ever. And the basic idea is that parenting is a skill that we have to learn and that we mess up a lot. But there are some principles, and he talks about setting limits in an autonomy supportive way. That was the first study I published, actually. So when my daughter was 5 and she would throw a tantrum, like after she did it a couple times, I cut out a couple of the handouts from the book and I put them on the refrigerator. And my daughter would throw a tantrum and I would say, Sophie, just hold it for a second. I go over to the refrigerator and I'd say, okay, 1, 2, 3, that's what I'm supposed to do. So then I'd go back, I'd acknowledge her feelings. I'd say, I know you're upset, but throwing things at daddy is not permissible. Why don't you make a picture of how angry you are right now? So what I'm trying to say is that even those of us who should know better struggle all the time about how to respond appropriately and how to inspire kids, how to set limits on kids. And I guess my biggest advice for anyone who finds this interesting, Haim Ginott wrote a book called Between Parent and Child. And I'll be honest, he gives examples of what uh, of empathic ways of responding versus our typical ways. And I think as a parent, you'll cry at some of the examples. When you see a real empathic response, it's, oh my gosh, why did I ever get that? Why don't I ever give that? And so I think a lot of it comes down to being empathic and focusing on the perspective of the person you're interacting with. And it's hard to do because a lot of us just think about our own stuff. And a lot of us think we know the right way and we should do what we should teach people and train people the way we were taught and trained. But I think, unfortunately, there's always been a misunderstanding of how damaging controlling strategies are and how helpful and useful and wonderful autonomy support is. There's studies that show if I'm autonomy supportive with my daughter, with my colleagues, with my students, it's very beneficial to them, but it's beneficial for me too. It's a really special way of relating to others, not getting caught up in these control struggles and just trying to be, present and empathic and human. So I should say that Heimganat, it's a kind of a humanistic theory, but it's also a tough theory. He believes in limit setting and structure. It's not like, boy, everything you do is fine. He thinks if we never set limits on students and kids won't feel safe. They won't feel secure. It's a matter of setting limits, but in an empathic way. The other problem is if you never set limits, you're going to start to hate your kids and hate your students. So the limit setting is I would say, Heimganat between parent and child, it captures best what autonomy and autonomy support are about. And there's a lot of practical examples that I think will remind you of when you were younger and how you reacted to different motivating strategies of adults.
Richard, it has been a blessing and honor. Thank you so much for being on our show.
You're very welcome, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. And I hope the sound quality was good, and best of luck patching it together.
Richard Koestner.
Okay.